Okay, guys. You think you know Betrayal? Let me walk you through the 15-year masterclass I received on the subject, because the story of how my stepdaughter tried to erase me from her life in front of 500 people is going to make your blood boil. The applause at her graduation was deafening, but the silence that followed when she finally called me for a handout was the most satisfying sound I've ever heard. This wasn't just about paying rent. This was about settling a debt that had been accruing interest for more than a decade, and the final payment was a spectacular karmic masterpiece. I'm glad to have you here, guys. If this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button to support more stories like this one. Also, feel free to share your views on the story. Now, on with my story. My name is Alex. I'm a wealth manager, a job that requires patience, foresight, and an intimate understanding of consequences. 3 things my stepdaughter, Isabella, knows absolutely nothing about. I met her mother, Claire, when Izzy was 8 years old. Claire was a widow. A sweet, gentle soul who had been left with a mountain of debt and a fiercely dramatic child after her first husband, a charming but entirely useless musician named Rohan, had passed away. I fell for Claire hard, and I accepted Izzy as my own, not as a replacement for her father, but as the daughter I never had. I didn't just provide for her, I invested in her. Braces, summer art camps in Vermont, a safe first car, the insurance that went with it, tutoring for her SATs. I paid for it all. I was at every parent-teacher conference, every dismal school play, and I was the one who held her hair back the first time she had too much to drink at a high school party. I did it all gladly because I loved her mother, and I was determined to love her too. But loving Izzy was like trying to hug a cactus. From the very beginning, she cultivated this tragic, romanticized narrative of her life. In her mind, her biological father, Rohan, wasn't a man who had left his family with nothing but debt and a box of old guitar picks. He was a misunderstood artistic genius, a poet snatched away from the world too soon. She built a shrine to him in her bedroom, complete with a framed, slightly blurry photo and a collection of his pretentious, unpublished song lyrics. My presence, my stability, my relentless practical support. It was an inconvenient footnote in the grand, tragic opera she had written for herself. I was the boring, sensible sequel to the passionate, artistic original. She tolerated my money, but she never, ever gave me her respect. My wife, Claire, was caught in the middle. She's a conflict-avoidant person by nature, and she was so desperate for Izzy's approval that she enabled the fantasy. "Oh, Alex, you know how she is," Claire would say, wringing her hands after Izzy had made a particularly cutting remark. "She's just so sensitive, so connected to her father's memory." It wasn't sensitivity. It was a carefully crafted performance, and my bank account was funding the production. The real linchpin of this whole saga, the thing Izzy knew about but never truly understood, was the trust. My own father, a shrewd and pragmatic man, adored Claire but saw Izzy's performative nature for exactly what it was. When he passed away, his will stipulated the creation of the Isabella Future Fund, a significant trust worth well over $500,000, designed to see her through her education and help her start her adult life. But my father was no fool. He appointed me, and me alone, as the sole incontestable trustee, and he included a very specific non-negotiable clause in the trust's bylaws, Clause 4B, the recognition and respect provision. It stated that the beneficiary, Isabella, must demonstrate consistent familial respect and public recognition of her guardians, plural, meaning both Claire and me, to access the full discretionary funds post-graduation. It was a brilliantly simple bit of legal engineering designed to prevent the exact scenario that was about to unfold. On her 18th birthday, Izzy had to sign documents acknowledging the trust's existence and her responsibilities as a beneficiary. I'm sure she skimmed it, her eyes glazing over the legal jargon, seeing only the dollar signs. She had no idea the paper she signed was a contract, not a birthright. Fast forward to her university graduation. I paid for the whole thing. The tuition, the books, the off-campus apartment with the ridiculously high rent. When she was accepted into a prestigious design program, I was genuinely proud. I saw it as the culmination of everything we had worked for. The day of the ceremony was bright and sunny. Claire and I sat in the front row, our hearts full. Izzy was named valedictorian. She looked stunning as she walked to the podium. And then, she began her speech. She thanked her professors. She thanked her friends. She thanked her mother, Claire, for her unwavering belief in her. Then she paused, a dramatic tear rolling down her cheek. "And most of all," she said, her voice trembling for maximum effect, "I want to thank my father, Rohan. Even though he couldn't be here, I know he's watching over me. His artistic spirit has been my guiding light, my inspiration, my everything. It was for him that I did all of this." The crowd awed. The cameras flashed. I saw a few people glance at me with pity. I felt Claire's hand tighten on mine. Izzy had just thanked a man who hadn't contributed a single dollar or a single hour of parenting to her success. A man who was a ghost. And me? The man who had funded every textbook, every meal, every rent payment that got her to this stage? I didn't exist. I was invisible. As the applause washed over the auditorium, a cold, calm clarity settled over me. This wasn't just an oversight. It was a public declaration. It was the performance of her lifetime. I leaned over and whispered, "Let's see who pays your rent after the applause fades." The game was over. She had just publicly and spectacularly breached her contract. The reception after the ceremony was a masterclass in awkwardness. People who knew our family's real story went out of their way to avoid making eye contact with me. Izzy's friends, who only knew the romantic narrative she'd spun, looked at me as if I were some sort of interloper at my own stepdaughter's celebration. Izzy herself was floating on a cloud of self-congratulation, accepting praise and acting as though she had just delivered the Gettysburg Address. Claire tried to run interference, fluttering around me with plates of hors d'oeuvre and strained, apologetic smiles. "She was just emotional, Alex," she whispered at one point. She didn't mean it. But we both knew that was a lie. She meant every single word. The most telling moment came when a distant cousin cornered me by the punch bowl. "That was a beautiful speech," he said, oblivious. "Her father must have been an amazing man." I just smiled. A tight, controlled smile that didn't reach my eyes. "He was memorable," I replied, which was the truest thing I could say. For the next month, I did nothing. I became a ghost in my own home. I was polite. I was civil. But I was distant. I didn't yell or argue. I simply retreated. This silent treatment was, in its own way, more unnerving for Claire and Izzy than any shouting match would have been. They were used to me being the stable, predictable center of their universe. My sudden emotional absence created a vacuum, and it made them nervous. Izzy was busy planning her grand move to the city. She had her eye on a trendy, absurdly expensive artist's loft, the kind of place with exposed brick and a $5,000 a month price tag. She spoke about it as if it were a done deal, assuming the trust fund money would just magically appear in her bank account. She sent me links to designer furniture and talked endlessly about the vibe of her new neighborhood. I would just nod and say, "That's nice, dear." My lack of enthusiasm, a quiet, ticking time bomb they couldn't hear. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in my office, reviewing a client's portfolio. The caller ID flashed, "Izzy." I let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Hello, Isabella." Her voice was casual, almost breezy, but with an undercurrent of impatience. "Alex, hi. Calling about something weird. The manager for the loft called me. He's saying the deposit check didn't clear, which makes no sense. Is there some kind of processing delay with the trust transfer? I assumed it would have been handled by now." The unstated accusation was clear. "You dropped the ball." "Anyway," she continued, "can you just give him a call and fix it? The first month's rent is due Friday, and I don't want this to become a whole thing." The sheer, unadulterated entitlement was breathtaking. She wasn't asking for help. She was assigning a task to correct my perceived incompetence. I leaned back in my chair the moment I had been waiting for finally here. "A processing delay? No. Everything on this end is proceeding exactly as it should," I said, my voice calm and professional, as if I were speaking to a client about a minor market fluctuation. "What did you expect to happen, Izzy?" That's when her tone shifted. My calm answer didn't fit her script. "What do you mean? What did I expect to happen?" she asked, a definite edge to her voice now. "I expected the money to be in my account, Alex. Like we discussed. You're the trustee. You need to fix this." "Ah," I said, letting the sound hang in the air. "The Isabella Future Fund. Yes, I am the trustee. And as the trustee, it is my fiduciary duty to ensure all provisions of the trust are met. And unfortunately, Isabella, you have a rather significant compliance issue." There was a confused silence on the other end. Compliance issue? What are you talking about? It's my money. My grandfather left it for me. My father, I corrected her gently, left you that money contingent upon certain conditions. Conditions you formally agreed to when you signed the beneficiary acceptance forms on your 18th birthday. Do you recall Clause 4B, the recognition and respect provision? I could almost hear her brain trying to access a memory she had long since discarded as irrelevant legal nonsense. I don't know, she stammered. It's a very important clause, I continued, my voice as steady as a surgeon's hand. It stipulates that access to the discretionary post-graduation funds is conditional upon your demonstrating consistent and public recognition of the support provided by your guardians. Plural, Isabella. That means both your mother and me. Your valedictorian speech, a copy of which I have already sent to the Trust's legal counsel along with a professionally filmed video of the event, was found to be a material breach of that contract. You publicly and pointedly erased 15 years of my financial, logistical, and emotional support while glorifying a man who provided none. As of this moment, the fund is frozen, and all discretionary payments have been suspended pending a full review. The silence was no longer confused. It was the cold, hard silence of a guillotine blade dropping. It was the sound of a carefully constructed fantasy colliding with an unbreakable reality. She didn't scream. She didn't yell. All I heard was a small, choked whisper. What? That single, whispered, what? Was the sound of her entire world tilting on its axis. The performative, dramatic Izzy was gone, replaced by a young woman in genuine shock. She was a chess player who had just realized her opponent had been patiently waiting for her to make one specific, self-destructive move for the past 15 years. You can't do that, she finally said, her voice barely audible. It wasn't a threat, it was a plea. That money is for my apartment, for my life. No, Isabella, I corrected her, keeping my tone perfectly level. That money was a gift, a tool to help you start your life, and it came with responsibilities. Responsibility is the part you've always chosen to ignore. You wanted the benefits of having me as a parent without the burden of actually acknowledging me as one. You can't have it both ways. The contract you signed was very clear. The shock began to curdle into anger. Of course, the next call was from Claire. She was crying, alternating between begging me to reconsider and accusing me of being cruel. Alex, she's our daughter. How can you do this to her? It was just a speech. It was never just a speech, Claire, and you know it, I said, my patience finally wearing thin. It was the grand finale of a 15-year performance. For years, you have asked me to absorb her disrespect, to fund her fantasy, to be the silent partner in our own family. You enabled it because you were afraid of confronting her. Now she has to confront reality. The trust isn't a weapon. It's a mirror, and for the first time, she's seeing a true reflection of her own actions. Izzy, as expected, threatened to get a lawyer. I told her that was an excellent idea. Please do, I said. Have him call the trust's legal firm. I will authorize them to send over the full video of your speech, the signed beneficiary agreement, and 15 years worth of my tax returns, showing you as a dependent, along with canceled checks for everything from your dental work to your tuition. I'm sure it will be a very productive conversation for him. That was the last I heard of a lawsuit. The smart-mouthed valedictorian was no match for a well-documented paper trail. In the end, she didn't get the loft. She had to give up the lease, losing the deposit she had paid with the last of her savings. She had to move into a tiny, shared apartment in a less-than-desirable neighborhood with 3 roommates. She had to get a real job, a grueling gig as a barista, to pay her bills. For the first time in her life, she was forced to live without a financial safety net. And the experience was a brutal education. Claire was heartbroken, and our relationship was strained for months, but she slowly began to see that my actions, though harsh, came from a place of tough love. Love for her, and even for Izzy. I wasn't just protecting myself, I was finally forcing her daughter to grow up. What happened to the money? As trustee, with the primary beneficiary in permanent breach, the trust bylaws gave me discretion to redirect the funds toward philanthropic endeavors in line with my father's values. I didn't touch a penny for myself. Instead, I worked with the university's financial aid office to establish the Clarity and Gratitude Scholarship. It's a full-ride scholarship, awarded each year to a student from a blended family who demonstrates not only academic excellence, but also a profound understanding of and respect for the unique sacrifices that non-biological parents often make. The story of its anonymous founding, inspired by an act of ingratitude, has become a small campus legend. "Izzy knows about it," Claire told her. "I don't know what the future holds for our relationship. Maybe one day, after she's truly lived a life of consequence, she'll understand. But I am no longer the silent, invisible benefactor. I am the man who taught her that respect isn't just a feeling, it's a currency," and she had spent the last of hers at that podium.